The mop squeaked across the floor for what felt like the 1,000th time that night. Danny Walsh pushed it in slow circles, watching the dirty water swirl into patterns under the dim lights of Maintenance Level 7. Most people on Orbital Station Harmony never came down this far. The fancy diplomats and rich traders stayed up in the bright levels where everything sparkled and smelled like expensive perfume. Down here it just smelled like cleaning chemicals and recycled air. Danny did not mind the quiet. His shift started when everyone else went to sleep, and he liked it that way. No one bothered him. No one noticed him. He could just do his work and go home to his tiny room without talking to anyone. After 12 years of cleaning floors and fixing broken things, he had gotten used to being invisible. He wheeled his cart past the recycling processors, their machines humming in the background. The corridor stretched ahead of him, empty and gray. Just another hour and he could clock out, maybe watch some old Earth movies on his datapad before sleeping. The same routine as always. Then he heard it. A small sound like a bird chirping, but sadder. Danny stopped pushing the mop and listened. There it was again, coming from behind the storage crates near the wall. He walked over slowly, not wanting to scare whatever was making the noise. Behind the crates, something moved. Danny pulled out his flashlight and pointed it into the gap. Two large eyes stared back at him, reflecting the light like mirrors. The creature made that chirping sound again, and Danny saw it was shaking. It looked like a tiny dragon from the old stories his grandmother used to tell him. Silver blue scales covered its body and small wings were pressed tight against its sides. The dragon was about the size of a house cat, with a long tail wrapped around itself. Its eyes were huge and frightened, and it made soft crying sounds that broke Danny's heart. Danny knew he should call security. The station had strict rules about alien creatures, especially important ones. But this little thing looked so scared and cold. It pressed itself further into the corner when Danny reached toward it, trembling harder. He sat down on the floor instead of reaching again. The dragon watched him with those big eyes, unsure what to expect. Danny moved slowly, taking off his work jacket. The station kept these lower levels cold to save energy, and the little dragon was shivering badly. Danny held out the jacket without getting closer. The dragon sniffed the air, its small nostrils flaring. After a long moment, it crept forward just a little bit. Danny stayed very still. The dragon came closer, step by tiny step, until it could touch the jacket with one claw. The material was still warm from Danny's body heat. The dragon suddenly rushed forward and wrapped itself in the jacket, disappearing into the fabric. Danny could see the small lump moving around inside, getting comfortable. Soft, happy chirping sounds came from the bundle. Danny smiled for the first time in weeks. He picked up the jacket carefully, feeling the weight of the small creature inside. It did not fight or try to escape. Instead, it settled against his chest like it belonged there. His stomach growled, reminding him that lunch break had passed hours ago. Danny had a sandwich in his cart, saved for later. He unwrapped it with one hand while holding the jacket bundle with the other. The dragon's head poked out, sniffing at the food with great interest. Danny tore off a small piece of the sandwich and offered it. The dragon looked at him, then at the food, then back at him. Its tongue flicked out and took the piece gently. It chewed with enthusiasm, making happy little sounds. Danny gave it more pieces until the sandwich was gone. The dragon licked his fingers clean, which tickled and made Danny laugh quietly. He looked at the time display on the wall. 30 minutes left in his shift. Danny made a decision that he knew was probably stupid. He could not leave this little creature down here alone in the cold. The station security would just put it in some holding cell while they figured out where it came from. The dragon would be scared and alone again. Danny finished his work as fast as he could, pushing the cart back to the storage room with one arm while holding the jacket bundle with the other. The dragon stayed quiet, seeming to understand it needed to hide. When Danny clocked out, his supervisor barely looked up from his datapad to wave goodbye. The walk to the worker habitation section took 15 minutes. Danny kept the jacket bundle hidden under his regular coat. His heart pounded every time someone passed him in the corridor, but no one paid attention to one more tired maintenance worker heading home after a long shift. His room was small, just a bed, a tiny bathroom, and a storage unit for his clothes, but it was warm and private. Danny set the jacket bundle on his bed and turned up the heater. The dragon crawled out and looked around the new space with curiosity. Danny grabbed his spare blankets and his only pillow, making a nest on the floor near the heater vent. The dragon watched everything he did with intelligent eyes that seemed too smart for such a young creature. When the nest was ready, the dragon climbed in without being asked. It circled 3 times like a cat, then curled into a tight ball. Danny sat on the edge of his bed watching the dragon settle in. Those big eyes looked up at him one more time, blinking slowly. A tiny claw reached out and grabbed the edge of Danny's pant leg, holding on tight. Within seconds, the dragon was asleep, its chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Danny lay back on his bed without undressing. He was too tired and too worried about what morning would bring. But when he looked at the sleeping dragon, safe and warm for the first time probably in days, he knew he had made the right choice, even if it got him in trouble, even if it changed everything. He fell asleep with that small claw still gripping his pants, and neither of them let go until morning. Alarm lights flashed red across every screen in the maintenance break room. Danny dropped his toast and stared at the emergency broadcast scrolling across the display wall. His stomach twisted into knots as he read the words that he had been dreading since he woke up. Urgent station alert. Missing juvenile. Draconic entity. Diplomatic emergency. All personnel report any sightings to security immediately. The little dragon, still nameless, was curled up asleep in Danny's locker at that very moment. He had wrapped it in his spare uniform and left the locker door cracked open for air. His hands started to shake as he read more of the alert. The dragon belonged to Ambassador Silverscale's family, one of the most powerful dragon clans in the entire galaxy, and Danny had hidden it in his locker like a lost puppy. He was so incredibly stupid. Danny watched the security updates scroll past. They were searching the upper commercial levels, the diplomatic quarters, the docking bays. Nowhere in the alert did it mention the maintenance levels. Of course not. Important creatures did not wander down where the janitors worked. The station authorities probably did not even remember that people lived down here. His shift supervisor walked past, reading from his own data pad. The man barely glanced at Danny before moving on. Just another invisible maintenance worker among dozens. Danny realized that maybe being invisible could help for once. He finished his terrible breakfast and went to check on the dragon. When he opened his locker, the little creature chirped happily and climbed up his arm to perch on his shoulder. Its claws were careful not to scratch him. The dragon nuzzled against his neck, making soft purring sounds that reminded Danny of a happy cat. Danny knew what he should do. Walk straight to security. Explain everything. Return the dragon before this got worse. But every time he tried to make himself do it, he remembered how scared the little thing had been last night, how it had trembled in the cold, how it had grabbed his pants and held on like Danny was the only safe thing in the universe. The dragon chirped again and licked his ear. Danny sighed and grabbed his work gear. Maybe he could keep it hidden for just one more day while he figured out what to do. One more day could not make things that much worse, right? Wrong. Everything got complicated fast. The dragon refused to stay in the locker. Every time Danny tried to leave, it made such sad crying sounds that the other workers started to notice. Finally, Danny gave up and let it follow him. He found an old tool bag and the dragon climbed inside happily, poking its head out to watch everything with bright, curious eyes. Danny pushed his cleaning cart through the maintenance tunnels, trying to work like normal. The dragon watched from the bag, making soft comments in its chirping language. Sometimes it sounded like the dragon was asking questions. Other times it seemed to be pointing things out to Danny, chittering excitedly at interesting machinery. Near the coolant processing station, the dragon suddenly went wild. It scrambled out of the bag and ran toward a wall panel, scratching at it and making urgent, loud noises. Danny had never heard it sound so insistent. He opened the panel to calm the dragon down. Behind it, the coolant pipes were glowing orange in spots. Danny's blood went cold. Those pipes should never be hot. He checked his scanner and saw the readings were dangerously high. One of the regulators had failed and the backup had not kicked in. In another hour, maybe 2, the pipes would rupture and spray superheated coolant everywhere. 3 workers had lunch break in the room next door. The coolant would have killed them. Danny called it in immediately. The repair team showed up within minutes, shocked at how close the disaster had been. They kept asking Danny how he had found the problem. The scanners were not scheduled to check this section until next week. Danny just shrugged and said he got lucky. He did not mention the dragon sitting quietly in his tool bag, looking proud of itself. But his friend Carol, another maintenance worker, had seen the whole thing. She had watched the dragon find the problem. After the repair team left, she cornered Danny by the water dispenser. Carol was a short woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked at the tool bag, then at Danny's guilty face. The dragon peeked out and chirped at her. Carol's eyes went wide. Danny waited for her to yell, to call security, to do the responsible thing. Instead, Carol started to laugh quietly. She reached out and the dragon sniffed her hand carefully before allowing her to scratch its head. "You found the missing VIP, did you?" Carol whispered. "The one that has security tearing apart the fancy levels?" Danny nodded miserably. Carol looked at the dragon again, watching how it pressed against Danny's chest and made happy sounds when he held it. "Poor little thing chose you, huh?" Carol said softly. "Can't really blame it. You are the only person on this station who notices when things need fixing, including scared baby dragons." She promised to keep the secret. By the end of the day, 4 other maintenance workers knew too. Not because Danny told them, but because the dragon kept helping. It found a leak in the water system that would have flooded the worker dormitories. It sensed an electrical problem before it could start a fire. Every time the dragon would get excited and insist Danny check something. The little creature could sense heat and energy in ways that no scanner could match. It was saving lives and did not even know it. By evening, the maintenance crew had adopted the dragon as their unofficial mascot. They took turns sneaking it treats from the cafeteria. Someone found an old heated pad for it to sleep on. Another worker gave Danny a better bag with air holes and padding. Danny carried the dragon back to his room that night, more confused than ever. It had been easier when he could pretend this was temporary, when he could tell himself he would return the dragon tomorrow. But now the little thing was teaching him words. Actual words in standard galactic language. "Warm," the dragon said clearly, snuggling into the heated blanket nest. Then it pointed at Danny with one tiny claw. "Safe." Danny's heart broke and healed at the same time. The dragon was learning so fast, understanding so much, and it thought Danny meant safety. After just 2 days, this little creature trusted him completely. The alert messages still flashed on his datapad. The ambassador was offering a huge reward. Security was expanding their search. Soon they would check everywhere, even the maintenance levels. Danny had maybe 1 or 2 more days before someone found them. He looked at the dragon, now almost twice as big as when he had found it. Growing fast on regular meals and warm sleep, it gazed back at him with complete trust and made a new sound. A rumbling purr that vibrated through its whole body. Danny had no idea what he was going to do, but he knew he could not let anyone take this little dragon away and lock it in some cold holding cell. Not when it looked at him like he hung the stars. Not when it said his name in its chirping voice over and over like it was the most important word in the universe. Danny safe. Danny warm. Danny home. He was in so much trouble, and he did not care at all. The inspection team appeared without warning during 3rd shift. Danny was teaching the dragon, who he had started calling Pip because of its chirping sounds, how to organize tools by size. Pip loved sorting things and would chirp happily each time it got the order right. They were so focused on the game that neither of them heard the footsteps. "What exactly is that?" The inspector's voice cut through the quiet maintenance tunnel like a knife. Danny turned slowly, his heart dropping into his stomach. Inspector Williams stood 3 meters away with 2 security officers behind him. All 3 stared at Pip, who had frozen in place with a wrench still gripped in its small claws. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Danny had known this moment would come eventually, but he still was not ready for it. Pip dropped the wrench and scrambled up Danny's leg, climbing onto his shoulder and pressing close to his neck. The dragon was shaking again, just like that first night. "That is the missing dragon hatchling," one of the security officers said, already reaching for his communication device. "We need to report this immediately." Danny put his hand up to steady Pip, who was making frightened whimpering sounds. "Please do not scare it. Pip did not do anything wrong." "Pip?" Inspector Williams raised an eyebrow. "You named it?" "I had to call it something," Danny said quietly. He knew he sounded defensive, but he could not help it. Pip's claws were digging into his shoulder now, and he could feel the dragon's rapid heartbeat against his neck. The security officers moved forward. Pip saw them coming and panicked. Fire burst from its mouth in a short, wild spray that scorched the ceiling. Everyone jumped back. Pip had never done that before. The dragon started making loud, distressed shrieking sounds that echoed through the metal corridors. "Stop!" Danny shouted over the noise. "You are scaring it. Please just stop moving." The security officers looked at each other uncertainly. Pip was small, but dragonfire was still dangerous. Inspector Williams held up his hand, signaling them to wait. He watched as Danny slowly stroked Pip's head, whispering soft, calming words. The dragon's shrieks faded to whimpers, then to quiet chirps. "The fire stopped. How long have you had it?" Williams asked. 4 days, Danny admitted. "I found Pip cold and scared in the storage area. I was going to report it, but then Pip got attached and I did not know what to do." "You did not know that hiding a VIP's family member was wrong," one officer said sarcastically. Danny felt his face get hot. "I knew it was wrong, but putting Pip in a holding cell alone seemed more wrong. It is just a baby." Williams pulled out his datapad and started typing. "You realize this is a serious diplomatic incident? Ambassador Silverscale has been searching for 4 days. The entire station has been on alert. And you kept the hatchling in the maintenance tunnels?" "I kept Pip safe," Danny corrected firmly. "I made sure it ate, made sure it was warm, taught it words. Pip helped us prevent 2 equipment failures that would have hurt people. So yes, I kept Pip in the maintenance tunnels, where I could actually take care of it properly." The officers moved to grab Pip anyway. The dragon saw them coming and the panic started again. This time, Pip's fire was more controlled but more intense. It aimed at the floor between them and Danny, creating a barrier. The officers backed up quickly. "Pip, no," Danny said firmly. "No fire. They are not going to hurt us." Pip looked at him with those huge eyes, still shaking but trusting Danny enough to stop. The dragon buried its face against Danny's neck and refused to look at anyone else. They ended up in a security holding room together. The officers had tried to separate them, but Pip went completely wild. More fire, more shrieking. It tried to bite anyone who came close. Finally, they gave up and just escorted both of them to the same room. Pip calmed down instantly once the door closed and it was just the 2 of them again. Danny sat on the hard bench and Pip curled in his lap, exhausted from the panic attack. The dragon was asleep within minutes, one claw gripping Danny's shirt. Danny stroked its scales gently and wondered how badly he had messed up his life. He would definitely lose his job. Might even face criminal charges, but at least Pip was safe. 2 hours later, the door opened. A dragon walked in and Danny knew immediately who it was. Ambassador Silverscale was huge, at least 3 meters tall even with its wings folded. Its scales were darker than Pip's, a deep silver that looked almost black in the artificial light. The ambassador's eyes were ancient and intelligent and currently filled with a mix of relief and anger. Pip woke up and made a happy chirping sound. The dragon recognized its parent immediately and jumped down from Danny's lap. But instead of running to the ambassador, Pip positioned itself between Danny and the door, protecting him. The tiny dragon puffed up its chest and made a small growling sound. Ambassador Silverscale stopped and stared. Its expression shifted from anger to confusion to something Danny could not quite read. The ambassador said something in the dragon language, a series of clicks and musical notes. Pip responded in the same language, but kept glancing back at Danny like checking to make sure he was still there. The conversation went on for several minutes. Danny sat quietly, understanding nothing but watching everything. He saw the moment when Ambassador Silverscale realized how strongly Pip was bonded to him. The ambassador's eyes widened and its wings drooped slightly. Finally, the ambassador switched to standard galactic so Danny could understand. Its voice was deep and sad. "My hatchling has imprinted on you. This is extremely complicated. I am sorry," Danny said honestly. "I did not mean for that to happen. I just wanted to help." "I know," Ambassador Silverscale said, sitting down heavily on the floor. The dragon looked tired. "I can see that you cared for Pip well. It is healthy. Happy." Speaking its first words, "Under normal circumstances I would be grateful." "But?" Danny asked. "But you are human, a maintenance worker. And Pip is from one of the oldest dragon families in the galaxy. Our traditions are very specific about proper bonds." The ambassador sighed, a sound like wind through caves. "Breaking this bond would traumatize Pip severely. But accepting it means acknowledging that my hatchling chose someone we consider beneath our station. No offense intended." "None taken," Danny said flatly. "I know what I am." Pip chirped urgently and climbed back into Danny's lap. The dragon pointed at him and said clearly, "Danny keeps me safe." "Danny is good." Ambassador Silverscale closed its eyes. When it opened them again, They were filled with resignation and something that might have been respect. Yes, Danny appears to be very good indeed, which makes this situation even more impossible. A security officer knocked on the door. Ambassador? The council is ready for the hearing. What hearing? Danny asked. The one that will decide what happens to both of you, Ambassador Silverscale said, standing up. We have much to discuss, Danny Walsh, and very little time to find a solution that does not break my hatchling's heart. Pip grabbed Danny's hand with both front claws and held on tight, refusing to let go. The station council chambers were bigger than any room Danny had ever seen. The ceiling stretched up so high that he could barely see the top. Seats arranged in a circle held representatives from a dozen different alien species, all watching him like he was a bug under a microscope. Danny had never felt more out of place in his life. Pip sat on his shoulder, behaving perfectly, but refusing to go to anyone else. The dragon kept one small claw hooked in Danny's collar at all times. Ambassador Silverscale sat in the section reserved for dragon delegates, looking uncomfortable and worried. The council chairwoman, a tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms, called the hearing to order. Her voice echoed through the chamber. We are here to resolve the matter of the lost hatchling and the human who concealed it. Danny Walsh, you stand accused of interfering with diplomatic affairs and endangering a minor dependent of Ambassador Silverscale. How do you plead? Danny swallowed hard. His mouth felt dry. I plead that I did what I thought was right. I found Pip scared and alone. I took care of it. That is all. Murmuring spread through the chamber. One of the council members, a reptilian creature with scales like armor, spoke up. You took care of it? You are a maintenance worker with no training in xenobiology. You could have killed the hatchling through ignorance. But I did not, Danny said, finding some courage. I researched dragon biology every night. I made sure Pip ate the right foods. I kept it warm. I monitored its health with every scanner I could access. Pip gained weight and started speaking. I think that means I did okay. You also prevented the hatchling from being returned to its family for 4 days, another council member added. 4 days of terror for Ambassador Silverscale, not knowing if its offspring was alive or dead. Danny felt shame burn in his chest. He looked at Ambassador Silverscale and saw the pain there. I am sorry for that, truly. I should have found a way to contact you directly. I was scared and I made bad choices. But I never meant to cause you pain. The chairwoman gestured for silence. We will hear testimony from others before making a judgment. First, the medical assessment. A doctor came forward, a small alien with tentacles instead of arms. It had examined Pip that morning. The doctor pulled up holographic displays showing Pip's health metrics. The hatchling is in excellent condition. Weight appropriate for its age. No signs of malnutrition or neglect. In fact, its language development is ahead of schedule. The human clearly researched proper care extensively. Next came Inspector Williams. Danny expected him to say terrible things, but the inspector surprised him. Walsh has worked maintenance on this station for 12 years. Never a complaint. Never a problem. He is quiet and keeps to himself, but he is reliable. When we found him with the hatchling, it was teaching it to organize tools. Not exactly the behavior of someone trying to harm it. Then Carol took the stand. She smiled at Danny before addressing the council. I saw the hatchling find a critical coolant leak that our scanners missed. It saved 3 lives that day. Whatever bond formed between Danny and that little dragon, it made both of them better. The hatchling felt safe enough to help others. That tells you everything about how Danny treated it. More maintenance workers testified. They talked about the equipment failures Pip had detected, the fires prevented, the lives saved. Danny had not realized how much Pip had helped in just 4 days. The council members started looking less angry and more thoughtful. Finally, Ambassador Silverscale stood to speak. The chamber went completely quiet. The ambassador's voice was heavy with emotion. I am grateful to Danny Walsh for keeping my hatchling safe. Pip could have died in those cold maintenance tunnels. Instead, it thrived because one human chose compassion over rules. However, we face a serious cultural problem. Dragon hatchlings imprint on their caregivers. This bond is sacred to us and cannot be broken without severe psychological damage. The chairwoman leaned forward. What are you suggesting, Ambassador? I am suggesting that Danny Walsh become Pip's official guardian, Ambassador Silverscale said. Several council members gasped. He would need to come to our homeworld of Pirellus 4. He would need to learn our customs and raise Pip according to dragon traditions until it reaches maturity at age 6. This is unprecedented. No human has ever been invited to live on Perilous 4, but I see no other option that does not harm my hatchling. The chamber erupted in debate. Aliens argued in a dozen languages at once. Danny sat frozen, trying to process what he had just heard. Move to an alien planet? Raise Pip for 6 years? Leave everything he knew behind? Pip looked up at him with those trusting eyes and chirped softly. The dragon seemed to sense something important was happening. It pressed closer to Danny's neck, seeking comfort. The chairwoman banged her gavel, demanding silence. This is highly irregular. Danny Walsh, do you understand what is being offered? You would give up your life here. Your job, your home, everything familiar, and you would be alone on a world where humans have never lived, where you would be the outsider. The strange one. Are you prepared for that? Danny looked at Pip. The dragon had fallen asleep against him, completely at peace. He remembered that first night when Pip had grabbed his pants and held on like Danny was the only solid thing in a scary universe. He remembered teaching Pip new words and watching the dragon's excitement at learning. He remembered how Pip had protected him from the security officers, tiny and fierce. Can I have time to think about it? Danny asked quietly. You have 24 hours, the chairwoman said. This council will reconvene tomorrow at the same time for your answer. Until then, you and the hatchling will remain together under supervision. Dismissed. Security escorted Danny to a better room this time. It had a real bed and a window showing the stars outside. Pip woke up and explored the space with curiosity, chattering about everything it saw. The dragon did not understand that its whole future and Danny's hung in the balance. Danny sat by the window and watched ships come and go from the station. His entire life fit in one small storage locker. He had no family waiting for him anywhere. No friends except the maintenance crew who would forget him in a month. His job was cleaning floors that would just get dirty again tomorrow. But Pip needed him. Really needed him. And maybe, for the first time in his adult life, Danny was needed for something that actually mattered. Pip climbed into his lap and pointed at a bright star outside. That one pretty, the dragon said in its growing vocabulary. Then it looked at Danny and patted his chest with one small claw. Danny pretty too. Danny laughed despite everything. I am definitely not pretty, Pip. Pretty inside, Pip insisted seriously. Where it counts. That was when Danny knew his decision was already made. He just needed the courage to say it out loud. Danny stood before the council with Pip on his shoulder and gave his answer in a voice that only shook a little bit. I accept. I will go to Perilous 4 and raise Pip properly. I will learn everything I need to learn. I will do this right. The chairwoman nodded solemnly. Then it is decided. The council recognizes Danny Walsh as the official guardian of the hatchling Pip, under the supervision of Ambassador Silverscale. May this unusual bond bring honor to both your species. 3 weeks later, Danny stood on the transport ship watching orbital station Harmony shrink in the viewing screen. Everything he owned fit in 2 bags. He had quit his job, given away his few belongings, and said goodbye to the maintenance crew. Carol had cried and given him a good luck charm from Earth. You will need it, she had said with a wobbly smile. The journey to Perilous 4 took forever. Danny spent every waking hour studying dragon language, customs, and history on his datapad. Ambassador Silverscale had provided him with detailed learning materials, and Danny attacked them with the same dedication he brought to his old job. If he was going to do this, he would do it right. Pip studied alongside him, thrilled to have so much attention. The dragon's language skills improved rapidly. Within a week, Pip could hold simple conversations in both standard galactic and the musical dragon tongue. The little dragon would quiz Danny on vocabulary and laugh when he mispronounced the clicking sounds. You sound like rocks falling, Pip giggled one day. But you are trying hard. That is what matters. Danny learned that dragon culture valued family bonds above almost everything else. Hatchlings were treasured and protected by their entire clan. Education started early and covered everything from history to flight to fire control. Dragons lived for hundreds of years, so 6 years of childhood was relatively short for them. He also learned that dragons had strict social hierarchies. The Silverscale clan was nobility, which made Pip's position important. Danny, as a human maintenance worker, ranked somewhere below the lowest servant class. Several chapters in the study materials made that very clear. He tried not to feel insulted. The transport finally arrived at Pyrolus 4 and Danny got his first look at his new home. The planet was beautiful and terrifying. Volcanoes dotted the landscape, their peaks glowing orange against a purple sky. Cities were carved into mountain ranges, with buildings that spiraled up toward the clouds. Everything was designed for creatures with wings. Danny saw very few flat surfaces. Ambassador Silverscale met them at the landing platform. Behind the ambassador stood dozens of other dragons, all watching Danny with expressions ranging from curiosity to obvious displeasure. Pip launched from Danny's shoulder and flew, really flew for the first time. The dragon's wings had grown strong during the journey. Pip circled the ambassador's head before landing and chattering excitedly about everything they had learned on the trip. Ambassador Silverscale listened patiently, then looked at Danny. "Welcome to Pyrolus 4. Guardian Walsh, your quarters are prepared. Tomorrow your real education begins." The Silverscale estate was massive. Hallways curved and spiraled upward in ways that made Danny dizzy. His room was in a lower section, with stairs instead of the flying platforms that other dragons used. Someone had tried to make it comfortable for a human, with furniture at the right height and a temperature control that went lower than dragons preferred. Danny collapsed on the bed that night, exhausted. The gravity here was slightly higher than he was used to. His legs ached and his head hurt from trying to process everything. Pip curled up beside him, already adapting perfectly to the new environment. "You did good today," Pip said sleepily. "Tomorrow will be better." "You will see. Tomorrow was not better. It was harder." Danny started formal education alongside Pip and immediately fell behind. The dragon hatchlings his age, about 4 months old, were learning advanced mathematics and galactic history. They could already fly for short distances and control their fire precisely. Danny struggled to remember which historical period came first and kept mixing up dragon clan names. The other hatchlings stared at him constantly. Some whispered behind their claws. One bold young dragon asked loudly why Pip's guardian could not even fly. Pip got angry and snapped at the rude dragon, defending Danny fiercely. That started a small fight that the teacher had to break up. The teacher, an elderly dragon named Scales Like Copper, pulled Danny aside after class. "This will be difficult for you," the old dragon said gently. "You are learning what our hatchlings absorb from birth. Do not be discouraged. I see that you take extensive notes and ask thoughtful questions. That shows wisdom." Danny appreciated the kindness, but it did not make the lessons easier. He studied late into every night, reading by the light of his datapad while Pip snored softly. The dragon language made his tongue hurt from the strange sounds. The history had thousands of years to cover. The mathematics used systems he had never seen before. Weeks turned into months. Danny slowly, painfully started to understand more. He learned to recognize different dragon clans by their scale patterns. He memorized the major historical events and their significance. He even started to appreciate dragon poetry, which focused heavily on fire imagery and flight metaphors. The other adult dragons remained cold toward him. They acknowledged him because Ambassador Silverscale demanded it, but Danny could see the disdain in their eyes. He was the human, the outsider, the strange wingless creature who somehow ended up raising a noble hatchling. Only Scales Like Copper showed him genuine respect. The old scholar would spend extra time helping Danny understand difficult concepts. One evening, after a particularly frustrating lesson about dragon philosophy, the teacher stayed behind to talk. "You are doing better than you think," Scales Like Copper said. "I have taught for 200 years. I can recognize dedication when I see it. You love Pip truly. That matters more than perfect pronunciation." "The other dragons do not think so," Danny said tiredly. "They think I am ruining Pip somehow, making it less dragon." "Perhaps Pip is making you more dragon," the old scholar suggested with a rumbling laugh. "Has that occurred to you? You protect your hatchling. You work harder than anyone I have seen to learn our ways. You put Pip's needs before your own comfort. These are the most dragon behaviors possible." Danny had never thought of it that way. He looked over at Pip, who was practicing fire control with the other hatchlings. The little dragon had grown so much. Its scales shone brighter. Its wings were strong. And Pip was happy, confident, excelling in every subject. One day, the entire estate gathered for a festival celebrating the turning of seasons. Dragon families showed off their hatchlings' progress. Pip performed beautifully, reciting ancient poetry and demonstrating precise fire control. But at the end, instead of bowing to Ambassador Silverscale like tradition demanded, Pip flew to Danny and landed on his shoulder. "I learned this because Danny helped me study every night," Pip announced to everyone. "Danny is the best guardian in the whole galaxy." "I am lucky," the gathered dragons murmured. Some looked shocked. Others looked thoughtful. Ambassador Silverscale watched Danny with an unreadable expression, then did something unprecedented. The ambassador bowed slightly toward Danny. Just a small dip of the head, but in dragon culture it meant respect. That night Danny sat on his balcony watching the volcanoes glow in the distance. Pip was asleep inside, exhausted from the festival. Danny thought about his old life on the station, the quiet, lonely nights, the invisible existence, the feeling that nothing he did really mattered. Now he was raising a dragon on an alien planet, learning in ancient culture, being changed by the experience in ways he could not fully understand yet. It was hard. It was lonely sometimes. But when Pip called him the best guardian in the galaxy, Danny felt like he finally understood what his life was supposed to be about. Not cleaning floors, not being invisible, but being there for someone who needed him, being brave enough to choose love over comfort, being proof that family had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with showing up every single day and trying your absolute best. Danny smiled and went inside to sleep. Tomorrow there would be more lessons, more struggles, more suspicious dragons judging him. But there would also be Pip, counting on him, trusting him, loving him without hesitation. That made everything worth it. 1 year after Danny arrived on Perilous IV, a formal challenge was filed against his guardianship. Danny learned about it when Ambassador Silverscale summoned him to a private meeting, looking more serious than Danny had ever seen. "A group of traditional clan leaders have demanded a hearing before the Grand Council of Worms," the ambassador explained. "They claim that Pip is being raised improperly, that it will never be a true dragon under your care. They want to dissolve the guardianship arrangement." Danny felt his stomach drop. "Can they do that?" "We have been doing everything right. Pip is top of its class. Everyone says so. Achievement is not their concern," Ambassador Silverscale said sadly. "They believe that only a dragon can teach a dragon to be truly dragon. You are human. Therefore, by their logic, you fail by default. We must present ourselves before the Grand Council in 3 days. Both you and Pip will be tested." Those 3 days passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Pip, now much larger and more confident, seemed less worried than Danny. The dragon had absolute faith that everything would work out. Danny wished he could feel the same. The Grand Council chamber made the Station Council look tiny. It was carved from the inside of an extinct volcano, with seats rising in tiers around a central platform. Hundreds of ancient dragons filled the space, their scales showing every color of fire and metal. The air itself felt heavy with their combined presence and power. 5 elder dragons sat in the highest positions. These were the oldest and most powerful worms in existence, each over 1,000 years old. Their leader, a massive dragon with scales like burnished gold, introduced himself as Flame of Ages. His voice echoed like thunder. "We have gathered to judge the unusual guardianship of young Pip Silverscale," Flame of Ages announced. "The traditionalist faction believes this arrangement dishonors our customs. They will present their case first." An imposing dragon with dark red scales stood to speak. His name was Stoneheart, and he did not waste time with politeness. "Look at this human. Wingless, small, weak. How can such a creature teach a dragon hatchling about flight? About fire? About the glory of our heritage? This arrangement is an insult to the Silverscale clan and to all dragonkind." Other traditionalists spoke, each one listing reasons why Danny was inadequate. He could not fly, could not breathe fire, did not understand dragon instincts, would raise Pip to be soft and human-like instead of strong and dragon-like. Some of their arguments hurt because parts were true. Danny would never fly or breathe fire. He was teaching Pip things from his own experience, which included human compassion and human values. Finally, it was Danny's turn to speak. He walked to the center platform with Pip at his side. His legs shook, but his voice came out steady. "I cannot argue with many of their facts. I cannot fly, and I never will. I cannot breathe fire. I am teaching Pip about humans as well as dragons. But I can argue with their conclusion. Pip is not less dragon because of me. Pip is more complete." Stoneheart laughed mockingly. "More complete? Explain this foolishness." Danny looked at Pip, who nodded encouragingly. "Pip speaks 3 languages fluently. understands mathematics better than I do, can recite your historical texts from memory, flies beautifully and controls fire with precision. By every dragon measure, Pip excels. But Pip also understands kindness, helps others without being asked, sees value in all creatures, not just dragons. Is that not valuable too? That is weakness, Stoneheart said flatly. Dragons should be strong, proud, superior. Pip is strong, Danny said firmly. Strong enough to be gentle, proud enough to help those in need, superior enough to bridge worlds instead of building walls between them. Flame of Ages held up one massive claw for silence. Impressive words, human. But words are not proof. We will test the hatchling directly. Pip Silverscale stepped forward alone. Pip walked to the center, head held high. The dragon had prepared for this. Danny had to stay back and watch, helpless to intervene. His heart pounded as the elders began their examination. They tested everything. Academic knowledge, fire control, flight maneuvers, historical recitation, mathematical problems. Pip passed each test perfectly, never hesitating or making mistakes. The traditionalist looked increasingly frustrated as Pip proved competent in every traditional dragon skill. Then came the flight test. Pip had to navigate through a complex series of aerial obstacles while maintaining fire control. It was designed to be difficult even for young dragons. Pip launched into the air confidently, wings beating strongly. Danny watched, holding his breath. Pip moved through the course beautifully at first, dodged the obstacles, maintained perfect fire bursts at each target, but near the end one of the targets moved unexpectedly. Pip swerved to avoid it and misjudged the distance to the wall. The dragon's wing clipped stone and Pip started to fall, spinning out of control toward the ground far below. Danny did not think. He just moved. He grabbed a maintenance cable from the wall, something left over from construction that no one had bothered to remove. He had spent 12 years working with equipment like this. His hands knew what to do automatically. He swung out over the open space, building momentum, calculating angles the way he had done thousands of times on the station. He caught Pip mid-fall, the cable swinging them both in a wide arc. Danny's arm screamed with the strain of holding the dragon's weight, but he held on. They swung back to the platform and Danny rolled to absorb the impact, keeping Pip protected against his chest. The chamber went completely silent. Dragon stared in shock. No human should have been able to do that. But Danny had done it without hesitation, risking his own life to save his hatchling. Pip was unhurt but shaken. The dragon looked up at Danny with wide eyes. You caught me. You cannot fly, but you caught me anyway. Of course I did, Danny said, breathing hard. That is what guardians do. Flame of Ages stood slowly, his ancient eyes bright with emotion Danny could not name. In 1,000 years I have never seen such a thing. A wingless creature flying through courage and love. Tell me, human, why did you not hesitate? Because Pip needed me, Danny said simply. Nothing else mattered. The eldest dragon turned to the other council members. I have seen enough. This human may not have wings or fire, but he has something more valuable. Complete devotion to his hatchling's well-being. He risks everything without thought of reward. He teaches strength and gentleness together. The traditionalists claim he cannot teach Pip to be dragon. I say he teaches Pip to be better than dragon. He teaches balance. Stoneheart tried to object, but Flame of Ages silenced him with a look. My judgment is final. The guardianship stands. Furthermore, I declare Danny Walsh a guardian of Paralis, an honor given to those who exemplify the best of our values. Let no dragon question this again. The chamber erupted in discussion, but the decision was made. Ambassador Silverscale came to Danny and Pip, pride evident in every line. You have done what I thought impossible. You have changed minds that have been closed for centuries. 3 months after the hearing, Danny stood in the new cultural center that had been built near the Silverscale estate. 5 other humans had arrived on Paralis 4, invited to teach and learn. Dragons were planning visits to human worlds. Pip had declared proudly that when grown, it wanted to become an ambassador like Silverscale, helping species understand each other. Danny watched students, both dragon and human, working together in the center, learning from each other, building something new. It had started with one scared dragon hatchling asking a lonely janitor for help. Now it was growing into something that might change how species saw each other across the galaxy. Pip landed beside him, now large enough that Danny could barely lift it. The dragon would be fully grown in 5 more years. Already it was becoming wise and thoughtful. balancing dragon pride with human compassion in ways that amazed everyone who met it. "Are you happy?" Pip asked. "Sometimes you look sad." Danny smiled and scratched the scales behind Pip's jaw, the dragon's favorite spot. "I am not sad. Just thinking about how strange life is. A year ago I was invisible. Now I am changing worlds." "You were never invisible to me," Pip said seriously. "From that very first night I saw you clearly. You were the brightest thing in that cold, dark place. You still are." Danny felt his eyes get wet. He blamed it on the volcanic dust in the air. "You saved me too, you know. I was just existing before. You gave me a reason to actually live." Pip pressed close against Danny's side, warm and solid and real. "Then we saved each other. That is what family does." They sat together watching the sunset paint the volcanoes gold and orange. Danny thought about his old life sometimes. The quiet nights on the station. The invisible existence. But he would not trade this for anything. Here he mattered. Here he had a child who loved him. Here he had proven that family was built through choices and dedication, not biology or species. A dragon hatchling and a human janitor had changed everything simply by choosing each other. And they were just getting started.